So this has actually been baking for 10 minutes. It was baking for 5 minutes when I pulled out and flipped it. And this is the second time I'm pulling it out to flip it. So it's been 5 more minutes. Every 5 minutes I do this. So there you can see it's not done.
And how flat or how?
This is 2 millimeters thick when I roll it. I have to use a second pan because if I try to take it off of this pan without it, it'll just fall apart. So you see it has some waviness to it, and it's risen just a little bit. I have to adjust it again because the rolling pin will stick to it. And then I roll it again, that same 2 millimeters. And while on the camera, I know that it doesn't really look like it has risen. It has. There are little, you can actually see them when you dust. There are little valleys in here that the stuff gets into. And I have to remove all of those. They can't be there because the laser requires it to be perfectly flat in order to work. Now, the reason I take 5 minutes is I found, and the 5 minutes is for this 2 millimeter. There's some I cut at 4 millimeters. You can do that for 10 minutes. But the reason is if you go past the 5 minutes, it starts to not burn, but finish the edges. And they become crisp. So when you go to roll it, you just crack all the gingerbread. So there's this, and you've got to watch it as well. So at a certain point while I'm doing this, and I'm watching them, I will have to move the one on the bottom to the top because the one on the bottom will start to cook a little bit faster than the one on the top. So as I'm watching that, I switch them back and forth as they start to do that. But you know, at some point, if you cook it too long or anything, you'll start to do this rolling, and you'll just hear it cracking, and you know, at that point, it's gone, it's wasted, it can't be used again. And the funniest part is the reason it gets these wavy lines is because of the parchment paper. And you've got to have the parchment paper to keep it from sticking to the pan. So, you can see it starting to lift over here. So, and the oddest things is if it's cold or if it's wet outside or something like that, you also have to adjust your time. If it's really dry, you have to adjust your time. But a lot of it is just watching it every 5 minutes. Just keeping an eye on it. And this will go on for the better part of the day.
So how do you know when it's done?
It's a feel. You can feel it. So in about two more turns, what will happen is I'll be able to turn it without using the pan. I'll be able to actually grab a hold of it and flip it. And that you can tell because you can tell it's not quite as soft. At that point, when I can start doing that, it's starting to get done. So it's just a matter of feeling the center until it's hard enough. And there are times when I'll feel it and I'll say, okay, that's hard enough. I'll put it over there to start to finish its hardening and dry and everything. And I'll go back to it and I'll lift it and it'll flex. Well, if it does that, it's not done. The nice thing about it is I can start the 5 minute process again. I can put it back in for 5 minutes and roll it and do it, and I can keep doing that until it's hard enough. Really, the only time you know it's done is after it's sat over there for about 5 or 6 hours and you lift up on it and it stays straight. Until then, you're at the mercy of the gingerbread. So you keep baking it until it's hard enough that they won't do that. Keeping in mind that once I put it in the laser, the reason it has to be a little bit harder than you would think is once I put it in the laser, that laser heats up that gingerbread again and will soften it again. So after it comes out of the laser, I then have to take it, put it in the dehydrator, and then put it between two thick sheets of metal to make sure that it stays flat, because the dehydrator will have a tendency to start to warp it.
But you could also take the same technique and apply it to like a scroll saw or a bandsaw, that once you make these nice sheets, you can accurately cut out your patterns, right?
Right, and I found that even with the scroll saw, if you're trying to go fast with the scroll saw or stuff like that, you will do the same thing. You'll start to heat up that sheet, and you can get the same problem where it'll start to bend. So the bandsaw, the scroll saw, this is just a different way to cut it. You could use a hot blade. They make razor blades that you can put on the end of a basically a soldering iron, and heats up that blade. You can cut really, really well with that blade, especially fondant. But it requires the blade to be hot. Same thing applies. It can actually start to melt things and heat things up. So you have to be careful about how fast and how long you use that.